Hi everyone, my name is Ashley York, and I'm talking to you today because I have ADHD. Um, Unlike some people, that's not really what defines me. I have a lot of different ways to define myself. I'm a pretty proud father. I have a lovely wife, so I try and be as good a husband as I can. I work really hard at singing barbershop music and helping with the barbershop chorus. I'm big into fantasy sports and video games, and professionally I'm in technical communications and I enjoy management, and I do web design and graphic design and other marketing stuff on the side. So those are the things that define me, but through all of those things, I have to work pretty hard to overcome the obstacles that are put in my way because of some mental issues. Um, just over a year ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD as well as obsessive compulsive disorder and manic depression and one other more minor issue. And um, while some people might think that would be traumatic, for me it was sort of a weight lifted off of my shoulder because I've been dealing with all of the symptoms and the issues of those diseases for a long time, but never really tried to fix them outside of the manic depression. And there was always sort of a doubt there. And um, once I was diagnosed, I began to work on fixing some of those things. Um, Trying to talk about all those things would be pretty overwhelming, but the ADHD is the one that I think is the least understood throughout society. I just watched an episode of the TV show Last Man Standing with Tim Allen a couple nights ago with my wife, and one of the characters had ADHD. Actually, two of them, they talk about having ADHD and some of the things, and they treated it well. I don't think people are like rude. I don't want to seem like I'm playing a victim card. It's not a situation like that. It's just more a situation where I think there's some symptoms and there's some coping mechanisms and things that aren't really thrown out there. And so if people aren't sure if they have ADHD or if you've been diagnosed, it can be maybe a little more overwhelming than it needs to be. Um, and I just figure adding some more information into the big giant pot of information that is the internet couldn't hurt. So I want to take a few minutes. I want to share a little bit of my story with you and some of the things that I do. And I don't know, hopefully it'll help. And I'd like to say that I'm going to make more of these videos, but I have ADHD, so I can't guarantee anything. But at the very least, I wanted to put this one out there. What I'm hoping to do is to go over the diagnosis portion, because I think there are some people who might have it and not realize it, or who may think that they might have it and use it as a crutch and it's not really there. And I think we can all benefit by knowing that a little better, how the diagnosis goes, at least some of the unique things in my case that I didn't know were there. And then I want to talk a little bit about coping with ADHD, both mostly as a person with ADHD, but also how you can maybe deal with a person who has ADHD a little bit better. And I think the overwhelming reason that I want to do it is because I spoke a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, I don't remember exactly when, with a friend of mine from the small town where I grew up who has a youth center. And he works with a lot of kids middle school age and high school age. And he found that there were a lot of kids who were diagnosed with ADHD who it was sort of like a life sentence. It was like a big giant negative thing. And it can be, don't get me wrong, but I think if we properly support those people who have ADHD, not just kids but adults, and properly understand it, then people who don't have it don't look down on those who do, and those who do don't think it's a negative thing. You just learn how to deal with it. It becomes more of a personality trait maybe than a giant debilitating illness. So that's why I'm talking. You can go through some details, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So in order to understand why I chose right now to take on this little video, I think it's cool to know where I'm at right now. I'm in a situation that a lot of people would consider very negative, when to me I'm really seeing a lot of opportunity. In December I was terminated from the job that I had. I was a program manager in the aviation industry working with some awesome customers, got to travel, got to work with some really good people, and I was doing a really good job growing business and keeping my customers happy. And I had a dispute with a manager who was probably, well, I know for sure, was being unethical and dishonest and we'd had personal issues since we went to college together. It is what it is. And I didn't like it. I didn't like that I was terminated. It was just very dishonest. The main reason I was terminated was flat out untruthful. But it presented a new opportunity for me. And truthfully, I had been looking for a new position. That may have been one of the things that really went into why I was terminated. But I needed to find something new. And so that was mid-December that I was terminated. And then at the end of December, I got to go down to Texas with my wife and my daughter and visit my immediate family in Austin. And it was awesome. It was a great uplifting experience. And then I came back, and if you've ever been looking for a job over the holidays, it's not a great time. People who are hiring aren't usually actively looking at that point because they're all on vacation, and you got the end of the year, which usually, or for some companies, is the end of a fiscal year. So hiring is not real active right around the holiday time, and it starts picking up as January rolls along. And that's what I experienced. And I had a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, but none that were really promising. And then all of a sudden I had two that were promising. And those two sort of became the impetus for me putting this video out there for altogether different reasons. One of them I did not get to move forward on, not by my choice. It was an opportunity with a company in Milwaukee that I had worked for 6 or 7 years ago when I was in college. And it was a really good fit, and the manager who was hiring for this really liked my resume. I was going through an agency, and they were excited about the opportunity. I found out about it on a Friday morning, went and talked with the agency on Friday afternoon per their requirements, was submitted on Friday before the end of the workday, and on Monday morning I got a call saying they want to interview you at 2 o'clock on Wednesday. But by Monday afternoon, he called me and said, we can't get the interview scheduled in their system properly. It keeps rejecting it. Well, I didn't find out till Wednesday that the human resources program for the company that I was going to be working with had listed me as ineligible for rehire. So something happened. To this day, I don't really know what happened. I don't know why I'm not eligible for rehire. And there's a couple things that it might be that really don't make sense to me as to why I would be ineligible. And I took it very personally, but what I think it might come down to is internet use. For a long time I had major issues with the internet. And I'll get back to that, but sort of the other side of the coin is that the other position that was available, and it looks like it's the one that's going to work out, and I'm really excited about it now, was with a group that does technical communications. And with that position, I'm going to be working mostly from home. So I'm going from having spent many years in one sort of routine, getting up in the morning, driving 45 minutes or so to get to work. Both of the last two companies I worked at were very close to each other. And then working in an office setting all day and then coming home. And I learned how to adapt to that, but now I'm having to drive myself a little more. I'm not really worried about it per se, but it's a change, and it's an exciting change, and it's an opportunity for me to think about the things that I'm doing. And that's the bottom line, is that through a job termination and when situations change, and you've got new challenges, both of those are types of things that present opportunities for us to be introspective and to think about where our weaknesses are and where things are that we might be able to do better. So when I was terminated, I took quite a bit of time to think about the criticisms I was given, whether they were valid or not, and how valid were they, what did I contribute. If they weren't valid, why was the perception allowed to go on that they were valid? And in some cases you can't help those things, but there's always going to be something you can do better. And so I've tried to learn from that. And now as I'm moving into a new position, I want to do the same thing and be proactive with it, not just wait for bad things to happen or just things to happen. Sometimes it's best to sort of not jump the gun, but jump ahead a little bit and think about, okay, here I have a new challenge in front of me, and I know what my pitfalls have been in the past, and I know I've minimized those, but how can I make sure I'm not falling into any traps now? So that's that's what's caused me to look at it. I've got this period of change, and it's particularly frustrating to me because I've come a long way in the last year. In November of 2012, I had a somewhat traumatic event at the same aviation company that just let me go. I'd been doing a very good job, so I don't think that was an issue. There'd been some issues with attention to detail, but things really came to a head when my name was put up for a potential promotion, and the manager that eventually terminated me, who I was not working under at the time, threw a little bit of a hissy fit, and said that he'd seen me on the internet too much. And it was a superficial thing on his part, but valid. It was 100% valid, and when he looked at IT records, they showed that I was spending way too much time on the internet. I certainly wasn't the only one on the internet, but I know for sure that I was on there way too much. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. But rather than, obviously it was traumatic at first, but rather than, get upset over everything, I thought to myself, what can I do to turn this into a positive? Because they didn't fire me, so obviously they liked some of the stuff that I was doing, but it was an opportunity for me to, again, be introspective at that point, but to be a little more proactive and say, here's an issue that I've had at multiple job stops. What's going on? And for me, I thought it was manic depression. That's something that I had been informally diagnosed with by a counselor when I was in college. And so I thought that's what was going on, but it was clear that I needed more help. So I took the initiative and set up an opportunity to meet with a therapist. And after a couple meetings, a clear picture emerged. And he said, I did have the manic depression like I thought I did. I had the obsessive compulsive disorder. That wasn't real debilitating, but he said I had a really bad case of ADHD. And as we talked through it, I'm going to go through some of the diagnosis details later, but there were all sorts of issues that I didn't realize were related to ADHD that I had really bad, in addition to sort of the stereotypical ones. When he put the whole big picture together, it was like, it was an eye-opening experience for me. And like I said, it was a weight off my shoulders, because it explained to me why I had had such difficulty, not just with the internet, but with other things. And again, I'm going to talk about those, but if you're struggling with some of that stuff, with focus and with some of the other things, the first major thing to realize is that diagnosis, and when you run into issues like this, even before diagnosis, the negative events that usually push us to get help are really a positive event. It's you having a reason for struggles that you've had. And especially in my case, I felt pretty happy that I had been pretty successful in getting the things that I wanted in life, despite the issue, and now I was getting help. And that's what I did. I went and got help. So I immediately started talking to that therapist more regularly about not just the ADHD, but the manic depression, and coming up with coping mechanisms that weren't necessarily, drug-related. But then I also saw a psychiatrist and accepted that there's a chemical issue up in this gigantic noggin that I have, and I need help with it. And that's not admitting weakness, it's the truth. If you've got a bad back, I guess I have a bad back too. And I went and got surgery for it because I recognized it's something that I needed help with, so why not do it for your brain? And then beyond that, beyond the therapy and the drugs, I also started really looking for coping mechanisms and really talking to the people around me. My dad has pretty bad manic depression, more on the depressive side, and there are people around me who have similar types of issues, and they all understand me. And because I've surrounded myself with some really great people, I have a lot of people around me who love me, who I could talk about that stuff with, and they can be honest with me. So I have barbershoppers who I've really come to lean on, who I told about my issues, and they had an inkling, and they're able to say, now look, I'm a little worried, are you okay? And I know it's from a place of love. So I guess the moral of that particular part of the story is that when all was said and done, I was successful before all the diagnosis, but I became sort of a machine afterward. And it became a big help to my mental state and my emotional state, because I realized that the failures that I've had all through my entire life have had explanation. I've never been one to meet my potential, and this is part of the reason why. And at the same time, it's important for me because I can honestly, I can look in the mirror, or I can look in the recording of the iPad here and say with certainty that I'm not using it as an excuse. I take accountability for the things that I've done, and I'm moving forward and finding awesome new ways to do things and to succeed. And I feel like I'm making people's lives better. And that's really the end goal. I can be even more successful and be an even better father and an even better husband and a more successful singer. I can be better, believe it or not, in fantasy sports and video games, and certainly much better in my jobs because, I've confronted this head on, and that's what I want for some people. The main reason that I feel it may be beneficial for someone like me to bring up what I have is that I think in diagnosing ADHD, or in thinking about diagnosis, or in thinking about getting help, there's just a lot of ambiguity out there, and there's things that some people don't even know. And I don't know what those things are. I don't know how much it's talked about, but I know, like, I was afraid to go get diagnosed. I was afraid for for a little while to even accept the diagnosis, in large part because it seems like it is an excuse, and it seems like, you hear about kids being diagnosed with ADHD in elementary school, and you say, how can you tell? You're just taking kids who are hyper and, claiming they have a disease and then drugging them out. And I'm sure there's a lot of that going on. At the same time, I went through my entire school, education and the first part of my career with no one ever mentioning it to me, at least, and just learned to work through it, but never fully successfully. So I don't know that we've found a good balance yet. And there were things that I didn't know had to do with ADHD. So what I want to do is go through a little bit of some of the symptoms that I had that helped lead to my diagnosis, and what it's like to get that diagnosis, so that maybe some people who might have ADHD that presents in the way that it presents to me can understand it. Maybe you go get help. You may not have ADHD, but if you understand it better, at least you can have an informed discussion with a therapist or with someone you love. And that's what I want to do. So for my diagnosis, I had the standard ADHD symptoms. I had the lack of focus. It was really hard for me to sit down for the most part and get stuff done, especially if I knew it needed to get done. I would sit down and I would do something, and every little distraction would pull my attention away completely. And it wasn't always when things necessarily needed to get done, but it was just hard to focus when there were specific types of distractions. So for instance, my wife, when we went on our first date, one way I know she must like me is we went to a restaurant that had a TV in it. And it was, as we were facing each other, the TV was sort of off to my left and to her right. And, it was, we were in the middle of the room, so it was across a room. But throughout the entire date, I kept turning, to see what was on the TV. I think it was a sports game, but it wasn't anything I cared about. But when there's a TV in a restaurant or in a facility, I cannot help but occasionally look at the TV to see what's going on. It pulls my attention away, and I always thought, well, it's because I watched too much TV as a kid. It's not. That really has nothing to do with it. It's just, it was easy to pull my focus away. I had sort of a laziness that kind of plays into the ADHD thing. Some people think that the ADHD is just an excuse for laziness. Other people think ADHD explains laziness, but it's there. It's part of what we generally think of as ADHD. Where there were times where I didn't want to do anything. And some of that was depressive episodes of the manic depression, but some of it was just not feeling capable of getting up and doing something. And there was an irresponsibility too. You know, I've always been a pretty smart guy, and I've always been successful, but not successful because, but successful in spite of blank. You know, people. That's the way people always talked about me. That's the way I talked about myself, and it always bothered me. I've always valued hard work. I'm the guy who, like, my favorite football players, growing up, after the Oilers left Houston. Screw you, Bud Adams. Uh, my my favorite football player was Doug Flutie. Not the most gifted guy ever, but worked hard. Now it's J.J. Watt. I just love those, those guys who, the lunch pail types of guys. The guys who show up and just work really, really hard. But I never lived up to that, and it always bothered me. Well, those are the obvious signs of ADHD, but there are a lot of people who have those things. And those things aren't always constant. Just about everybody has times where you can't focus, or where you're lazy, or you're irresponsible. To me, what opened my eyes and what allowed me to really accept the ADHD were the things that I didn't realize were symptoms of the ADHD. And this is going to be sort of like a Freudian type of thing where, if I were to talk about your itchy cheek, my cheek literally just itched because I said itchy cheek. You start thinking that you have every illness under the sun because you start talking about symptoms. So please try not to let that happen. But for me, it was abundantly clear that these particular symptoms were, completely clear for me. So one of them was anxiety, and you don't think of ADHD as an anxiety disorder, but here's what some people didn't understand, and what I didn't really understand until the therapist helped me put it into words, and that is, with that lack of focus, especially when there was something that needed to be done, and if there was something that was particularly large in the sense that there was a lot of work, and when I say work, I mean like a lot of typing to be done, or a lot of repetitive activity. I had a hard time focusing on that, but it wasn't just a hard time focusing. I would literally get sick. I would get so anxious over what needed to be done and how big it was that I would get a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I never, got to the point of like throwing up or anything, but I felt like I was going to. And when things would start to spiral out of control, the anxiety would get worse and worse to the point where it was driving me into depressive episodes because of the ADHD. And that's the connection that I was missing. I thought it was the depressive episode causing the lack of focus, but in a lot of cases, in most cases, it was the other way around. Another example of a symptom that you don't really associate with ADHD all the time is lack of self-control, and specifically when you're talking about conversations. So, I have a pretty awesome family, and we've developed a pretty cool, quick wit. Especially my sister and I love throwing sarcastic jabs out there, and not to hurt people, but, we have fun, and I like being a part of conversations like that. But when I'm particularly out of control with the ADHD, I have a hard time controlling those comments. So, like, if I'm sitting in a meeting and I have this funny thing that pops into my head, I have to say it. And I'm usually pretty good about not saying things that are inappropriate, but someone else may have said something funnier than what I was going to say, but I would feel like that same anxiety, that strong urge that I have to throw my comment out there. If I didn't say it, it would just eat at me. Or if other people were having a conversation that in any way, shape, or form pertained to me, or that I had any information about, I would feel like I had to jump into that conversation, even if it wasn't entirely appropriate. So I would butt into people's conversations. And nobody ever told me that it was inappropriate, although I'm sure some people thought it. But I think a lot of the times I was excused because I could be funny, and I could be informative, and I knew a lot. But it still wasn't appropriate. And the other, it sort of goes along with the lack of self-control, but in a different vein is, one of the symptoms of ADHD, and this is crazy that it was mentioned, because I never thought it could have been, was you think people are saying your name or trying to get your attention when they're not. Now, I'm hard of hearing, to add it to the list of things. You probably think I'm a complete nut job right now. I am. But even despite being hard of hearing, like, I would think that people were calling my name all the time, especially at work. And I would say, what? And people would be like, I didn't say Ashley. And again, nobody ever thought anything of it, but I always felt so stupid. That went back to the anxiety. So they kind of work together. So the anxiety, the loss of control, the thinking people are saying your name, you don't generally associate necessarily with ADHD. Definitely there. Another one is lack of punctuality. And this is one that really drives to that idea of irresponsibility. That, we recognize, we typically just say, oh, that person's just irresponsible. That person just doesn't care. They're disrespectful. I couldn't be punctual for anything, and it always just ate at me. And I would come up with all sorts of ways to fix it, and it didn't help. And what I found was that I either had to be way early, which caused logistical issues, or I would be a little bit late. And it just, again, it always ate at me, and I always assumed it was just me being irresponsible. Well, in my case, it turned out that had to do with ADHD. Once I got help, that was one thing that improved really quickly. All of a sudden, I was on time to things, and I didn't have to leave half an hour, 45 minutes early. I didn't have to do those logistically difficult things. I just did what I did, and I was on time. Ironically, now I'm having some issues with insurance, so I don't have access to Adderall, and my punctuality is not great all of a sudden, and it's not an excuse. I'm more on time now than I was before I started fixing everything. So there is a huge element of me and me needing to say this is my responsibility. So that's not an excuse, but at the same time, if you're someone who's not punctual and it doesn't really fit, that might be a symptom. It's all a big package. The last one is perhaps the most mind-blowing symptom of ADHD that I found hardly anyone knows about, and that's called hyperfocus. So I mentioned that I'm big into fantasy sports and barbershopping and video games, and all my life I've been like this. I've had other hobbies. I built combat robots. I've been big into art at times and composing music and conducting a symphony, and I've had these hobbies that I've been able to pour time into. And yet, here I was claiming to be ADHD or thinking I might be ADHD, and it seemed so counterintuitive. How could I focus on things that I want to, but not focus on other things? Clearly it's just me making excuses. But the thing is, with ADHD, it's not hard for people with ADHD when they find something that they like to do to be able to focus on it. The issue is that they focus too much. So, for instance, with video games, and I still have to watch out for this. If I start playing a video game, I can focus, but I focus too far. And there have been lots and lots of times in my life where I'll sit down to play a video game and I'll say, hey, I've got a few minutes. I'm going to play, one game of football. Next thing you know, I've played 6 or 7 games of football and simulated 3 seasons on a dynasty, and, I've gone so far overboard with it that now it's 4 o'clock in the morning and my whole schedule is thrown off. And I didn't know that the time was going. I did this on New Year's Eve, going into New Year's this year. I think it was that day. It was around that time. And we were down by my parents. And I started playing a free game that comes on Xbox 360 consoles called Hexic. It's a puzzle game. It's very addicting for people who are logical and into patterns, and for people who are ADHD. So I started playing this, and I just kept saying, well, one more game, just subconsciously. I didn't realize, I think I started this at like 11:15, and at 3 o'clock my wife came out and asked me what I was doing, and I thought, in all honesty, that it was maybe like 12:15. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I would get this all the time, this type of hyperfocus, and I would ignore consequences, and I would be unaware of times, and if I was hyper-focused, my wife could come down and say, hey, I need you to do this, and I would hear everything she said and say yes, but it would never register, it would never lock into my brain, because I'm actually focused over here, and she's talking to me over here. So, I guess that's the big one to bring up, because I think that's a reason some people might completely dismiss the idea that they have ADHD, because, hey, I can focus on this, so I must not have ADHD. It could be part of the picture. I'm not saying if you have any or all of these things that you have ADHD for sure. I'm not a medical professional. That's the simple truth. But these are all things that didn't fit the normal script of ADHD as I knew it, and had I known them, I would have seen what the therapist saw that was so obvious. That I clearly have ADHD and that it's bad, and that it's to the point of really negatively impacting my life. And the thing is, once you're diagnosed, that's not a silver bullet. There's no drug that they can give you that's going to get rid of everything. There's no one coping mechanism that's going to get rid of everything. So there's no silver bullet, but at least you can start to get help. And I'll tell you, the anxiety was a bigger part of my ADHD than I suspect what a lot of people have. The anxiety really was the main issue. That went away in large part right off the bat, just knowing what was going on. It's sort of like, if you think about fears and you start to rationalize your fear, and once you think about it rationally, you realize how stupid it is. That's what I had with the ADHD. And then, I threw in all the coping mechanisms and the therapy stuff and the drugs and just continued to get better and better, and it wasn't long that I really felt like a machine. And that's how I feel now. When I have my Adderall, which I have it for a little while now, my wife is picking up the prescription as we speak. I'm very excited. I'm a machine. I really am. I feel great. And it's great because it allows me to help the people around me a lot more and help people succeed, and I love that. It allows me to be who I really am, and I don't have to be successful in spite of. Instead, I can say I'm successful because. And I can say that I'm helping other people be successful. So that's how I was diagnosed. Those are some of the details. The last little thing I wanted to get to is I wanted to talk about some of those coping mechanisms that I've mentioned, just to put some ideas in your head, thinking about things that you may or may not have thought of before. I think some of these are obvious. Some of these are not obvious, maybe, I hope. And I'm not going to go into extreme detail, because like I said, I hope to be able to do these a little more often, but just want to start giving you an idea and going into some of the details. So I'm going to go ahead and try and use my iPad as a camera here. I have it set on a different camera setting, but I'm going to show you my workspace a little bit, and the reason that I'm going to do that is because in time I hope to talk more about it, but there's one key trait with my workspace that I hope becomes apparent. So here it is. It's in an unfinished part of our basement, so please excuse the unfinished portion. But you'll notice, you'll have to ignore the files there. We just moved our filing cabinet down here, and I'm working on getting things even more organized. But for the most part, it's organized, and that's a recent trend for me. Organization was always one of my huge weaknesses. And what I found is having an organized workplace is huge. And having a workspace that you're comfortable with is huge. So I built this workspace starting in late fall last year so that I would have some place to work, not realizing that I was going to be doing a lot of work from home. But I'm glad I did, because now a lot of the work is done for me to have the type of work area that I really want. I have everything that I want at my fingertips. I have all my technology over here. I have some tools and things. I have creative projects. I have a big, wide open workspace, and it's very clean. There's some stuff here that's only here because I just did some projects today. I just made a desktop heater to try out. But that stuff will be gone by the time I'm done working here this afternoon. So one coping mechanism for me is just maintaining physical organization. My mom always said, if your space is cluttered, then your mind will be cluttered too. And I never gave her enough credit for that, is the simple truth. And our whole house is starting to get like that. I made my wife messy when we started moving in with each other, and she learned my messy habits, and now I'm having to lead us in breaking those habits. It's my fault that we're messy, but it's important for my well-being that we start not being messy. So we do the dishes on a more regular basis. Not that we went overboard with it, but now I see more importance in keeping a fairly clean kitchen on a nightly basis as opposed to every other night. So situations like that, or keeping our bedroom picked up. We're getting better with all that stuff. So your workspace, your living space, keeping it clean, that's one of my coping mechanisms. Another big one is using daily processes. And so I'm just starting to implement these here because I'm used to working in a workplace. And what I've always had, and what I'm going to continue to have, and I'm going to modify it to better fit my current situation, was a daily task list where, with things that needed to get done, I had printed hard copy sheets in a binder, one sheet for every work day. And I could write down, I need to get this done on this day. And I would keep that running list. And obviously, the day that I'm working on would have the longest list, but I kept it a month out. And that way, as things came up, I didn't have to have that fear of, did I remember everything I need to do? Because I just got in the habit of, write it in there. Here's when I'm going to do it. And it also allowed me to keep a running tab of things that I have done, which helps me because I do move pretty quickly, and I do bounce around a little bit, and I'm learning to take advantage of that. That's a real strength. There are going to be some people, there are going to be some people who view that as a negative, and who try and play gotcha. And for me, then I was able to bust out my sheet and say, well, you're saying that I wasn't paying attention, but I got this, and this done that day, in addition to doing this other stuff. I could point to everything that I did on that given day. Ironically, that helped me when I was going through issues with my previous employer, because the gentleman who had issues with me tried to accuse me of not working enough, and I could go back and say, not just, here's how many hours I worked, but here's what I was doing for every minute of those hours. Here's everything I did. So you're wrong. But more importantly, they help me keep things organized. It helps me stay on track. And again, what you don't realize is how the anxiety plays into that. So keeping that daily task list is obviously important to keep me organized and to keep me from forgetting things. But it's just as important to helping me keep from feeling anxious and feeling sick to my stomach that I forgot to write something down or forgot to do something. I know I'm got everything set up and ready to go. I know that I'm on top of what needs to get done because I'm keeping that list, so I don't have to worry about it. I can take that time that I would have spent worrying about it and put it to something more productive. A third big thing as far as coping mechanisms go is self-awareness for me. I have always prided myself a little bit on self-awareness, but it really took off even before I was diagnosed, and it's continued after I've been diagnosed. So I keep a spreadsheet of the weaknesses that I've identified, mistakes that I've made, traits that I'm not happy with, traits that other people have said they weren't happy with, or if I have something that goes wrong, even if I'm not at fault, I might say, okay, here's a weakness that I've discovered, or something that I can work on. It's not even necessarily a weakness. And then I'll probably go into more detail on this if I do more of these videos, because it's a big one. I'll list the weakness, I'll list an action plan for addressing the weakness, I'll list the current status of that action plan, and then I grade it on a scale of 1 to 5. A 1 is something that is a huge, urgent, current issue, and a 5 is something that's been fixed, and fixed is a temporary thing. Not fixed in the sense that it's never going to be an issue again, because those things all have a chance to become an issue again, but fixed to the point where I don't need to put any more focus on it in the short term. And then I'll have a date. I have date columns on both sides. I do this in a spreadsheet, so at the very beginning and at the very end. And the date at the beginning is the last time that I evaluated myself on this, and the date at the end is as soon as I'm done evaluating, then I say, here's the next time I'm going to evaluate this. So if it's something that happens more repeatedly, or that I have the opportunity to fail in it more repeatedly, or that's more urgent, then I'll have a shorter time frame until the next date. If it's something that may not happen as much or may not be as urgent, then I'll put a little longer time frame on it. And that's when I'll have the opportunity to reevaluate where I am on that sort of 1 through 5 chart, but I can only go up 1 each time. So then that also makes sure that I can't fix it, for a week, say that it's fixed, and then it comes right back. I'm going to have to take a little while to keep thinking about it and checking in on it. And even when I get it to a 5, if it's something that has happened multiple times or is particularly bad, I might put a date on it for 3 or 6 months in the future to make sure I come back and look at it again. So that's the main way that I'm working actively on self-awareness, and I fixed a lot of issues. Like I said, the organization is a big one. My organization was terrible before I started at, not the last company, but the one before that I worked for. And that's when I really started being self-aware, and now I think my organization is one of my strengths. The last coping mechanism I want to hit on is a big one, and that is I've really found a lot of people to talk to. So when something goes wrong, I know that I have a lot of people that I can turn to, and it's just a matter of who do I want to talk to about it today to make sure that I get help. And that helps me minimize the chance that I'm just going to internalize everything and turn it into a bigger deal, or, fail to cope with it correctly, or fail to be honest with myself. So those are the big coping mechanisms for me. I'm hoping to do this every now and then. I don't know how often. I may not ever do it again, let's be honest. But I'm hoping to throw it out there. There's some more helpful hints out there, talk about some of the details of what I do. But even if I don't, I hope if you watch this and you're someone who might have ADHD or know someone who does have ADHD, that you can get an idea how things might play into it. And I think we think of ADHD as something that helps people who are failures or people who have significant failure in their life explain it and use it as an excuse, when a lot of really successful people have had ADHD. And it's not really that type of thing. And instead, ADHD is just, one character trait. And if you recognize it and recognize that it is a chemical issue in the brain, but you get the proper help for it, then you can take a lot of things that are considered negative in one perspective and turn them into positives. You can take that fast-paced mind and turn it into the ability to get things done quickly. You can turn a lot of excessive energy that may tire people out and turn it into something that helps you energize teams. There are a lot of negatives that can come out of it that you can turn into positives, and that's what I'm hoping to do. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I think my contact information is part of my account, and or leave a comment, and let's get some good discussion going if you want. But if one person sees it and maybe gets some help, then yay me. So, hope to see you again. Again, my name's Ashley York. Hope to talk to you guys, see you guys again. Thank you very much. Bye.